Welcome, everyone. Great. We'll be getting started in just a second. Some people still joining. Right. I think the number of people joining is slowing down a little bit, so we'll be getting started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I will stop sharing my screen so I can see you all a little better. Welcome. This will be a 1-hour program, and as you saw, the session is being recorded. We'll devote ample time to questions at the end, so please use the Q&A button to make sure that we can easily find them. Please note that we have captions and interpretation available for today's event. Thanks so much to our captioner, Andrea, and to our interpreters, Catherine and Rhonda, and to my Creative Capital colleague, Saidu Kumara, who will be dropping information and links into the chat. My name is Dr. Aliza Shvarts, and I'm the Director of Artist Initiatives here at Creative Capital. My pronouns are she, her, and I have long dark hair, am wearing a white shirt, and I'm sitting in front of a bookcase. I'm joining you today from Creative Capital's offices, which are situated on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Lenape people, called Lenapehoking, colonially referred to as Manhattan. The Creative Capital website and servers, which make today possible, occupy Ohlone, Chochenyo, and Ramaytush land, colonially referred to as South Beach, California, and Tonga land, colonially referred to as Los Angeles. I encourage you all to introduce yourselves by placing your names, pronouns, and locations in the chat. And I'm going to introduce Maura Brewer, who will be speaking to us today about artist statements. It's my real pleasure to introduce Maura, who is a 2022 Creative Capital grantee. She's a video artist with essayistic, research-driven projects that critique the relationship between feminism and capitalism. Brewer received her undergraduate degree from School of Art Institute of Chicago, her MFA from UC Irvine, and she was a Whitney Independent Study Program Fellow from 2014 to 15. Her work has been exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art, Art in General in New York, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, the Centre d'Art Contemporain Genève in Geneva, the Museum Moderner Kunststiftung Ludwig Wein in Vienna, Bikini Wax in Mexico City, and Gallery F15 in Moss, Norway. Her work has received press coverage in the Paris Review, CBS News, The Guardian, and CBC's The Current. She's a current recipient of Lens Photography. She's a recipient of the Lens Photography Council Award at LACMA, the Philadelphia Area Community Collaboratives Fellowship at Haverford College, the Creative Economic Development Fund at CCI, and the Fellowship for Visual Arts at CCF, and is a 2021 COLA Master Artist Fellow. In addition to her visual art, she works as a private investigator. Thank you so much for joining us today, Maura, and welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Maura. My pronouns are she, her. I have short, dark hair. I'm wearing a dark sort of sweater thing, and I'm sitting in front of a plant and some chairs in Los Angeles, which is Tongva land.
We're really thrilled for everyone to be joining us today for our first Artist Lab. Today we'll be discussing artist statements. The Artist Lab is part of the Creative Capital curriculum, a newly launched educational initiative. It's available for artists to take for free at their own pace via an online platform, Canvas. You can register on our website or using the link that Saidu is about to drop in the chat. This is, I hope, going to be the first of many Artist Labs, so please stay tuned for additional events. Let's get started, Maura. I'm really thrilled that you're here with us today. I know you're someone who's thought at length and quite deeply about what an artist statement is and what it can do. So I wanted to begin maybe with a sort of definition of sorts and ask you to tell us, what is an artist statement and what should it do?
All right. Hi. It's so exciting that so many people are here, by the way, and I'm like mesmerized just looking at all the chats where everyone is. It's so cool. And I am like really excited to be here. And artist statements are kind of a nerdy thing that I particularly really genuinely like. I think that artist statements are notoriously torturous for most artists, I would say, like the majority. But I taught artist statement writing for 10 years, when I was teaching adjunct before my career shift. So I taught it at USC and at Art Center for a really long time in Los Angeles. And I have always been an artist, writing is part of my practice. So writing an artist statement was maybe, never quite as horrifying for me as it is for a lot of people, which is lucky. But I really, over my 10 years of teaching a lot of people to write statements, I became really fond of the artist statement just as a tool for like professional and personal growth in the studio and the space for reflection. And I genuinely think that it can be a really amazing, empowering document for artists. So I have a real fondness for it. There are lots of things that I hate about grant applications and different kinds of applications. Like I really, really hate work samples, getting work samples together. So it's not that I think that like everything about this process is great, but I genuinely believe that there's a lot that you can get out of writing an artist statement beyond just like professional development stuff. But to talk about what it actually is, I do think that there is this kind of, there's this sort of tension in talking about an artist statement and thinking about it, which is that on the one hand, it's just like a super functional document. And it's this thing that, due to the professionalization of the arts, we're kind of all forced to do if we're, trying to, fund our existence and survive and be able to be creative in the world. So on the one hand, it's just this like really functional thing, like writing a resume or something like that. But then on the other hand, it's this kind of existential document. And I think this is actually the combination of the two that makes people hate it so much. It's like, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? And so that sort of like conjunction of the professional and the existential can be like a really horrible place. It can be really painful. But I think that the artist statement, like, where it can be really amazing is that it is this document that kind of asks you to develop a sort of objectivity regarding your own work. Like, that it's, for me, there's always, when I'm making an artwork, I'm someone who starts very much from the idea. And so I always have an idea. And in a lot of ways, like having the idea is the most exciting and rewarding part of the entire process. And then it's all downhill from there. It's like, I've got the idea and then the idea is like so shiny and great. And then as I'm making the art, it's like, oh, it's this process of like sort of coming up against my own limitations. Like there's always this kind of gap between what I wanted to do and what I actually did. And the artist statement is this space where you kind of have to negotiate that gap. You have to sort of like get out of the space of your like imaginative relationship with your work and say like, well, what have I really done here? And also like, what does my audience understand and see? And so that can be that sort of production of distance through the act of writing can be really useful. And I think like really healthy and necessary for helping your practice grow and move forward. Because how can you move forward if you're not even totally clear on what you've done, right? So it's like this accounting for yourself. And it's also a kind of accounting for yourself that I think is like a good, it's like a good exercise in checking your own ego, because really like what you've made is what you've made. And those objects, you might want them to be something else or imagine that they're something else, but they are what they are. They exist in the world separate from you once you've created them. And so it's a way to kind of re-encounter your own practice, I think. Yeah. But Aliza, I'm really happy that this is framed. I feel myself talking a lot. I'm really happy that this is framed as a conversation, because you're also an amazing artist and a really fantastic writer. And you're also the director of artist initiatives at Creative Capital. So now you're in this sort of position where you get to, like you're someone who's received a lot of grants and had exhibitions of yourself and written a ton of documents like this. And now you're on the other side and you get to read them all the time. So you get to see both sides of the coin. So I would be curious what you think, and like, what are your thoughts about artist statements?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I've thought really deeply about them my whole professional life. I'm very similar to you in that I am an artist who is very comfortable with writing. I probably write too much. I'm probably too in language, too in my head. That's sort of my thing to work on in my own trajectory. So the artist statement for me as well has always been maybe, they're kind of nightmarish, I'm sure, as they are for all people, but they're kind of exciting too. And I think it's exactly what you're saying about that, it's serving as a space of accountability, right? This kind of existential dimension of it can be exciting, right? Who am I? And the functional requirement can also be a kind of creative challenge. How do I relate who I am as an artist and the work that I make to somebody who doesn't know me and to somebody who doesn't know the work? So one thing I've really been interested in now, I'm on the other side, and I too have taught artist statement writing for quite a number of years in my life as a professor and adjunct. Though now I'm at Creative Capital, I see a lot of artist statements, and I see people writing them who are at all different career stages, who are working in all different kinds of disciplines, genres, places in the world. So it's been really fascinating to see what people do at that space. And one thing that's really struck me is how it is so much a relational space. It's an opportunity to provide a lens on your practice for someone who isn't necessarily seeing your work, doesn't necessarily know your work, but is interested in getting to know your work nonetheless. One way I've been thinking about it too is it's a relationship between, it's a text that negotiates a relationship between people who don't necessarily meet each other, but are dependent on each other. Artists who are explaining their work to the world, who are putting their work out there, who are applying for grants, applying for residencies, making websites, all the professional things that we do to engage with the world. And then everybody on the other side who is interested in art, who's in a position to help support that art. So I see it as a kind of, text that can be a way to bridge that relational gap. One way I've been thinking of it too is, it's at least as a challenge for myself when I, am rewriting my own artist statements, is how do you be a good comrade to the person on the other side, right? How do you invite someone in? And I'll say this has been a challenge for me. I think, a lot of us maybe have the tendency to think defensively when we're writing our artist statement, to think about how we can justify the work that we do. And I think, I think that that's valid in a lot of ways. But it's also an opportunity to think generously, right? To assume the best of your reader and to bring them into your own thought process while you're also doing that very important work, I think, of accounting for, what you wanted to do and what you actually did and what the gap is. I really love the way you put that. And I know that we were talking before too about the difference, and I think this would be an interesting thing to kind of segue into is, the difference between an artist statement as a relational document and an aspirational document, and how that actually relates to the work of art itself, or the work of art making itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's what, thinking about it as a relational document, I think it's really beautiful. Because it's, it's what you said. It's like, there's this, the artist statement, it's relational in two directions, right? It's like a relationship that I have with my own work that's mediated through this piece of writing. And then it's a relationship that my audience has, with my work, or, my potential funder or whatever has with my work. And so it's a kind of bridge that goes in both directions. And I totally agree with you about it as like a potentially generous document, or like an exercise in empathy, you know, like with your audience, right? Like how often do you go, like, honestly, how often do you go into a gallery and see art and have no idea what's going on, you know, like, and that, you know, that confusion, you know, art is experiential. It isn't straightforward. That's the value of what we do, you know, like, is that it can hold this sort of ambiguous space, experiential space. But the artist statement can also be this kind of bridge into that space for people. And it's also, you know, and to get it to really work, it's like, not only do you have to come to terms with your own practice and kind of what you've done, but also like what that audience experience is, you know, like it requires you to kind of think from the side of, okay, someone's coming in, they don't know anything about me. How do I give them a set of coordinates through which they can orient themselves around my practice? And in terms of the artist statement as an aspirational document, I think all art production is aspirational, you know, like everything we do is aspirational. Like, you know, every time I make an artwork, it's like, this is it. This is the time when my idea and the thing are going to match up, you know, like this is every time it's this kind of, you know, hope for me, it's hope for better communication with my audience, you know, because communication is super important to me. So it's always this kind of, there's always this sort of aspiration of being like understood, you know, on the side of making art, and I think on the side of writing something like an artist statement. And so in that way, I think it's like a useful document that can exercise those aspirations, right? Like how can you bring them closer to life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a lot of ways, the artist statement, I mean, like all of the professional, you know, documents one has to produce, all of the sort of facets of, you know, professional practice, but I'd say the artist statement in particular, it kind of focuses, at least for me, an artist's attention on the idea that, you know, we're always dealing in representation. We deal in representation when we're making our art. We're answering questions about how we represent ourselves, ideas, others. And the artist statement, I think, is, you know, maybe one of the most crucial exercises where, as an artist, you get to reflect on that kind of question of representation in a kind of more meta way, right? As a person who negotiates representation, how do you want to represent your professional practice? Yeah. And that's why artist statements can be so torturous, but I think can also be so fulfilling, you know, when you really get into the writing of them.
Yeah, right. When you get to the place where you feel good about it, like you're like, oh, this is a thing that actually represents me in a way that I can sort of stand behind, you know. It's a really satisfying space to be in, I think. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about, you know, what artist statements can do, you know, their function as a relational text, which is a kind of double relation. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share? And I know, you know, this is always a kind of like, you know, this is a very simple question for a not very simple answer, but is there anything an artist statement should not do, or people should be careful about when they're going about writing their artist statements?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a tricky question, right? Because everybody's practice is so different. I think I had this teacher in undergrad who's actually, I don't think she liked me very much. I won't say her name. She was actually a great artist, and I'm such a pleaser that it like kind of destroyed me that she didn't like me very, or like, I don't know, I was 18, so this is probably all like a fantasy. But she had us, I think that's the first artist statement I ever wrote was for her class. It was a sculpture class. And I wrote, you know, and I'm such a pleaser. And kind of a good girl, you know, and so I spent all this time just like writing and writing and writing. I'm so excited. I had so many ideas, you know. I brought in this document that was probably just like, you know, pages of rambling ideas. And I was so excited to talk to her about it. And I like sat down with her. We had a little individual meeting, and she was like, Maura, an artist statement should make your work easier to understand, not harder to understand. And like that has rung in my ears for like, you know, 20 years. every time I write something, because she was completely right. And it just it was, pithy, and maybe she could have been a little nicer to 18-year-old me, but it just kind of boils it all down to it, right? It's like the statement is meant to help people, right? It's not a barrier to entry. It shouldn't add things onto the work that aren't already available. It should explain, it should be accountable to the things that are available. What are you looking at? What is it? Yeah. And that can be really hard to figure out, because everything about your work, right? Like, like what kind of sandwich you ate on the day that you made that one part of it or whatever, right? Like, too much. And so figuring out like what of those many things that which of those are actually relevant or available to the audience and should be explained, that can be a really hard thing to figure out. It's kind of like looking in the mirror or something where you see too much of yourself, and so you can't see yourself at all or something like that. And so from that standpoint, it's often helpful to have just a friend kind of talk to you about like what it is that they see. Yeah.
I think that's really helpful. I think that I love looking in the mirror as a kind of analogy for this. Because right, it's this intimately personal thing, but it also has to do with how you're representing yourself to others. It has to do with an engagement with someone beyond yourself. And, I can imagine, as one does when you're looking in the mirror, you choose different features to highlight on different days, you change strategies, you have different contexts that you're, kind of representing yourself for. So I think that's like a really great visual analogy for how we would think of this. Can I ask, I think a lot of times we think about an artist statement as something that, you write as an emerging artist, and then it's done. But I think that the lived experience of that is very much it's not a one and done thing. How often do you rewrite your artist statement? How is it as a document for you?
I mean, every time I apply for something, I rewrite at least a good chunk of the artist statement. In fact, when you were just reading my bio, I was like, is my work about feminism and capitalism anymore? I'm moving much more towards capitalism these days. Maybe I should revisit that sentence. So yeah, like several times a year at least. It's like, this shit is so hard. Like, they're really like when there are a lot of applications like in the fall, and there's like the sort of fall window and the spring window. It's like sometimes I feel like all I'm doing is like rewriting professional documents and formatting work samples and rewriting artist statements. And then people will be like, oh, but you've already got those materials, so isn't it easier? But like the answer is not, I mean, of course it's easier every time you do it. Like nothing's worse than a blank page. It's better to, like it's something that you at least have the coordinates that then change and evolve. But no, it's a huge amount of work every time you do it, and I do think that it has intrinsic value in and of itself. And it actually in some ways is the thing that keeps me like applying to things, I think in some ways, because otherwise it's so pleasureless, honestly, to have to do all this administrative work for yourself all the time. And so like finding some, like really kind of leaning into the intrinsic value of writing an artist statement, like here's where I account for myself, here's where I account for my work, like that's the thing that makes that process worthwhile to me. In and of itself, because God knows you apply for like 20 things and you get like one,
Yeah. So maybe we could add to that, in a sort of more concrete way that, one of the things you should not do as an artist is let your artist statement be static. It's a living document in lots of ways that you should constantly be looking at and, using it as the space of accountability. In terms of things that artists, might worry about, or, to get back to some more concrete advice, what would you say to an artist who's worried that they're going to, ruin the work by over-explaining it, or, using too many sort of words in the artist statement?
Right. Kind of ruining the experience. Mm-hmm. When I taught this for a long time, this was something that came up all the time. Like my students would ask me about it, or they would have a lot of anxiety about it. And for me, I mean, I understand that as a concern for sure, right? Like, art is this experience. It's often this experience of like kind of pure encounter, right? Often like art at its best can be an encounter with a kind of difference that you really have to navigate. And I can totally understand fearing that if you write something, that written thing will overwrite the sort of lived experience of the artwork itself. However, I have almost never seen a situation in which a well-written artist statement ruins any kind of experience with the work. And I think a poorly written artist statement could ruin your experience of the work. Like if you read something and the statement is kind of like bullshitty, like it's full of jargon and like I can like something and then read a statement about it and be like, ugh, like it can do that. But I think that if an artist statement is honest, all you're doing is, you're describing an experience, and it's also a process of translation. So it has a relationship to the experience, but it isn't the same or equivalent to the experience. It's a translation document. And so as an act of translation, I don't think that it can ruin anything because it does something else, it produces a different register of experience. It doesn't overwrite an existing one.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really helpful. I'm going to ask us now to turn to some concrete exercises people might use to help them draft an artist statement or rewrite one that they have. And I should say, what we're talking about right now are some of the ideas that go into writing an artist statement, some considerations, but I highly encourage anyone on the webinar today to take a look at the Creative Capital curriculum. Maura's exercise, as well as many other exercises, are in there to help you concretely navigate how to produce that document. So please check it out. But to give you a small taste, I'm going to share my screen again, and let's go into a concrete approach that might be helpful for writing an artist statement. So Maura, I know that this is an exercise that you developed over many years of teaching people how to write artist statements. I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through it.
Yeah, okay. So this is prescriptive, and I want to put an asterisk on this, which is that everybody is different, this is like the beautiful thing about artistic practice. This is a way of addressing an artist statement that I have found works for a lot of people, but it's not like the be all end all. And, I'm not trying to like run your life or anything like that. So I guess the way that I kind of developed this over time is like, the biggest issue that I would see when I would read artist statements, especially with like young, emerging artists, is that you would read the statement and then you would look at the work and there would be this gap, right? It's like, again, I think a lot of it is about the sort of gap between like where you want to be, or like all the thoughts you were thinking of when you were making something, and then like what the thing is itself. And so for me, the way to write an artist statement that addresses that problem is just to start from the work itself and leave all of your, try to, as best as you can, leave all of your sort of experiences and ideas about yourself and your practice and your work aside, and just kind of look at what you have made. So this is this kind of exercise, and I use this also, right? Which is, so you start with just like 3 projects that you've done, just as a starting place. You could have more, but they should be projects that you feel good about, like you're happy with them, and you just describe them like one at a time. Just start with 1 and do 1, and then 2 and do 2, and then 3 and do 3, and you just describe it in like the dumbest possible way, right? Just like super basic, right? So you would say like, you start with the title of the work, right? Like, so you say X title, is a painting of a kitty cat, right? Like really, really basic. And then you get, deeper into it, but you just like stick with what it looks like, right? Like how, if it's, I'm just using painting, I'm not a painter, I'm just using painting as a convenient example, right? But if it's a painting, like what sort of materials are in the surface of the painting, what are the colors, what's the composition, just like a really sort of rote kind of description. And then you move on and talk about, what are the ideas that are in the work, right? So it's a painting of a kitty cat, like tell me about the kitty cat or whatever, right? Like what's the concept? And thinking about, how does the way, the materials you've used to make something, how do they inform the subject matter? How are form and content relating to each other, right? It's different to, paint the kitty cat than to take a photograph of the kitty cat, for example. So once you've done that, so you do that, so you have like, after you've done that, you've got like a good, like beefy paragraph for each thing, right? So then you've got 1, 2, 3. And then you go through and you like circle, what are the common things that appear across each project? And for some people, that's really easy. Like maybe you're a painter and you paint in the same way every single time, or you're a painter and you use similar subject matter, recurs across your work. For other people, that might be like less easy to identify, like a lot of, I think, another kind of concern that I encounter are people who have like very conceptually oriented practices where their subject matter may switch around, right? Like that might be a little, might take you a little bit more time to think about what are the commonalities. But I assure you that they're there because you are the commonality, right? Like you are one person. And so there will be like a tone, an approach, a kind of subject matter that you're drawn to. And it's about seeing that through line, right? It's about identifying that through line. So from there, it's like, okay, well, you've got these terms, right? Like you have recurring, material approaches, processes, concepts. And so you take those things and generalize them out into an artist statement. So you would then say like, okay, well, I'm a video artist who uses, appropriation and public records to make work about, feminism and capitalism, although maybe I'm not doing that anymore. I don't know, So, but you see what I mean, right? So you start, like one of the sort of tricky things about an artist statement is that you're supposed to have this bird's eye view of your own practice. So it's not a project description generally, right? It's like what are the commonalities between all of your projects, right? And how do those things add up to a practice? But I find that starting from the individual art objects is a much easier way to get that bird's eye view than starting from the top, right? Which I think a lot of people do, is they start from like way up here. And then you're like, oh, who am I? And it can start to feel really bleak or existential or, terrible. Whereas if you say like, okay, no, I have made this and this and this and these, and allow the objects that you've made tell you who you are, right? Because all we are is what we do in life. Then I think you'll get to an artist statement, which is grounded, honest and grounded in your practice. So that's how I do it.
Thank you. It's really helpful. So for everyone who's eager for some really concrete ideas of where to start, I think this is a really fantastic exercise and guideline. Start with the work. I really love this idea that the work will, lead you, will tell you who you are as an artist, and you can extrapolate from there. For people who are wanting to see examples of artist statements, you can absolutely look on the Creative Capital website. There's many, many artist statements there, 901, I believe. You can also look at the Creative Capital curriculum for more guidelines about how you might craft the artist statement and different exercises. We know it's not a one-size-fits-all process. I really encourage everyone to try this one out, especially if you're changing directions, especially if you're an artist who has not that much experience, or if you're someone who's, kind of sick of your own artist statement. I tried your exercise, Maura, and it's been really helpful for me. I too am constantly rewriting my artist statement, as I think many of us are. I know there's quite a lot of questions already, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a second and turn to the questions. I will say though, if we don't get to your question, please feel free to email us at curriculum@creativecapital.org. But we're going to try in the next 25 minutes, get through as many questions as we can. And please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat and to ask more questions using that Q&A button. So here we go. Let me pull up the document. All right. So I'm going to try and answer questions or pose questions out loud that I don't think we've addressed, but I will absolutely come back to them if we have time, if I don't get to your question. So the first one I see is, do you have guidance on how to craft an artist statement when your chief medium is text? So this can be quite challenging. If you are a writer, how do you write about writing, right? How do you write about your practice of writing?
I mean, in some ways, Aliza, I think you're more qualified to talk about that than I am. I do write in my practice as well, and I will talk about my writing projects in my statement. I kind of approach it in a really similar way, right? Like the artist statement is still this kind of translation, like intermediary space between, the artist and the thing they've produced, whether that's like a text or a video or a painting. And I think you can still like sort of, I think you can think of a piece of text in the exact same way, right? Like what are the formal qualities of that text? How does the prose read? What are the linguistic choices that have been made? What is the subject matter? How do those two things influence each other? And then kind of like extrapolate out, into this document. But I don't know, Aliza, do you have other suggestions for writers?
Let's see. I thought that's a great answer. And it's a tough question. For me, at least, the way that I write in my writing is not necessarily the way I approach the artist statement. And I actually really kind of enjoy that as a moment to kind of switch my tone, switch the function, to think about what an artist statement is doing that I'm not normally doing when I write an article, write a text, write a piece. So I think for writers, one of the things to be really attuned to is what's the function of the text, and you get to define that function, right? If the function is to make yourself legible to a certain kind of opportunity, if it's to present your work on a website, those are different functions than you might have when you're approaching your actual writing practice. I think that a lot of us worry, whether we're visual artists or performing artists or literary artists or moving image artists, that we're not going to sound like ourselves, right? That the text will become something other than what we are. But I really enjoyed what you said, Maura, and I think it's really true that the continuity is you, right? You can be doing something different, answering a different kind of call, performing a different kind of function with this writing, but it will still be you. And I think the most important thing is to be authentic to who you are without worrying that you're needing to overperform your own kind of artistic voice. Let's see, I'm going to keep going. There's a lot more to say on that. There's a lot more questions, so I'm going to keep going. Let's see. Let's see, I'm going to try and see one that's a bit broader. So is it okay to, this is a similar question, I guess. Is it okay to write an artist statement the way we speak, like less formal than other professional writing? Would foundations, museums, galleries, etc., reject us by default for speaking in our actual voice?
Oh God, that's a good question. What do you think, Aliza?
I don't think that there's any reason to not write in your own voice. I would say though, at least for me, I have lots of voices, right? I think when I try to think about what my own voice is, it gets really complicated because I'm someone who's really invested in theory, and I am constantly told, by people who are, trying to be mean to me in different contexts, that I should use my own voice and be less theoretical. But I actually really find genuine and authentic expression in the language of theory. So what does it mean to have your own voice? I think also this is a question that's laden with identity, right? We all perform speech in different ways, given different kinds of, institutional contexts that we're moving through. So I think, it's absolutely important to use your own voice and to decide what your own voice is in that context. I guess our voices, to me at least, seem always relational to who we're speaking to and what we're speaking for. But I don't think that there's anyone, out there who's going to automatically dismiss something given, based on tone.
Yeah, I would, I'm glad to hear that. I wanted to hear you say it because I don't give away grants. So I'm not sure, but I can say that when I was teaching this, I do, like when I talk about like my sort of exercises, I do get self-conscious that it's kind of prescriptive and it'll produce like it could produce like a kind of one note, like tone or something like that. But when I was teaching it, like I would work with students, some of my students are incredible writers, like super funny, like really witty, like great writers. And I would always just tell them like, okay, like, let's just like write something really basic first so that there's like a baseline comprehensibility, like you make sure you're like, you're being honest, you're like doing the work of describing your practice. And then like go back into it and think about like, well, how can I make this sound a bit more like me, as a kind of like second round, writing anything, isn't really a first draft situation. You're not really writing until you're in like the second or third draft, right? So I think, I think as long as like, your voice is honest and communicative, then I don't see how it could be a bad thing.
Yeah. If anything, it's kind of the realm of creativity, right? I think that, in ways it can be an exciting question for yourself. What is my voice in this context? What is my voice when I'm speaking to this institution or this person or this audience? Yeah. We have a question there's a couple questions about this. I'm going to condense them. Can we talk a little bit about the difference between an artist's bio and an artist statement? I know they're quite similar, and I will say again, the curriculum does have some more details on how you can think, distinctly about these two very seemingly similar documents. But Maura, I'm going to turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, okay, there's this overlapping universe of documents, and this is in the curriculum. So, we're kind of just focusing on the artist statement, but, there's really like, I don't know, maybe four, like it's the artist statement, the project proposal, the work description, and the bio. And those things are all kind of interrelated, but not exactly the same. But you kind of can't, like, once you're in the regular practice of applying to things, you're sort of writing those four documents in tandem all the time. And they're all like, they should all sort of like harmonize with each other, but they all have like a little bit of a different point of emphasis, right? So the bio is like, is more like, who am I? Where have I been? Like, what have I done? And that is, and it's generally a bit shorter. And it's like, what are you trying to communicate about yourself? So like in the bio, like Aliza just read one of my versions of my bios when she introduced me. And I always feel self-conscious, like, oh, I should take some of this out and like, whatever, like I want to change it. But like, what does it do? Like it has like one sentence up top about, what kind of work I make. It's got a little bit of CV stuff in it, like, here's why, I'm qualified to be here, more or less, and like, that's up to you, what things are important to you and what things aren't. And then my work as a private investigator is important to me at the moment. So then I'm sort of ending with that as well. So it's less, whereas if you read one of my artist statements, which I'm happy for you to do, it's much more like, like that sort of first sentence that says, I'm a video artist and I make work about X, Y, and Z. And then it goes much more into, depth about what that video practice is. So I would talk about like, my work is essayistic and it appropriates from different sources. It relies on public records, like I can go into like, and then I talk about like, what are the different subject matters that I'm dealing with in my practice. So basically takes that first sentence from the bio and expands into it.
I think that's really helpful. And, I'll say too, and maybe this answers also a question that I see coming up. I think it's also context specific. So sometimes grant opportunities or residencies, or, you might organize your own website in a way where you have a distinct artist statement, artist bio. You might also submit an artist resume or post it somewhere as a link on your website or something like that. Sometimes, for example, like in the Creative Capital grant, In our effort to minimize the labor intensiveness of our application, we just ask for a short and long bio. But this might be a place for you to adjust, right? What each piece of writing is doing. If you're only being asked for a bio, then you might want to include some of those details about your accomplishments, place you've shown, things like that. But you also might want to give some context for what the work is. Someone in the chat, I believe it was Ralph, said, maybe a way to think about it is the difference between process and products. And I think that's a great way of putting it. And of course, how you're balancing that is going to be in response to the room that you have to write. And if you're making it your own room, right? If it's for your website, you're the one who's deciding what's up there, what kinds of text you're going to need. You might also think about the different function that you want each piece of text to do. What should people know coming away from your artist statement that's about how you make your work and why you make the work that you do, versus your bio, which is who you are professionally, how you navigate the various dimensions of the cultural sphere that you navigate. I hope I answered a couple questions in one with that one. Let's see. And I should say too, if you have a more personal question, again, feel free to email us and we can try and answer that for you. This is an interesting one because this is a different perspective. Do you have any advice for emerging curators who commission other artists' work based on their curators' visions, but who are also new to the field and have not produced extensive work? I guess I'm not sure here about whether this is about producing a curatorial statement or, if you're a curator who's navigating artist statements, but I think it brings up a really interesting thing that might be helpful for everyone, which is, how do you navigate the artist statement as a tool, basically, in the field, both when you're writing one as an artist and maybe when also you're using them as curators. And I know many of us move between those roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I think you froze, Maura. Oh dear. I'm not sure if it's just me or if you are indeed frozen. Sorry, everyone. Well, while we wait for Maura to come back. Okay, all right, she froze for everyone. Apologies about that. But while we wait for Maura to come back, I'll answer, to the best of my ability, maybe a bit of that question, which is, oh, good. Okay, I'm not frozen. That's good. Which is, you can really think about how, as a curator, you're using these statements. How are you getting to know some of the artists through their statements? What does that add, to the way that you understand their work? And then you might think too, if you're a curator who's trying to write your own curatorial statement, how artists and how other professionals in the field are going to use that in a similar way. And this brings up, I think, an exercise that's always really useful, and I really encourage everyone to do, which is to go look at the artist statements of artists that you really admire. What constitutes a good artist statement, a successful artist statement, is very dependent on the context. So I think it's always important to begin with the question of, who do you really admire in terms of how they represent their own work, right? How they navigate representation as an artist. And then how do they translate that to these kinds of professional tools like an artist statement? See what they look like, see if they're helpful for you, and look at a good range of them. It's always helpful. If you look at the Creative Capital website under the artist projects, you can see people's project descriptions, and you can see their bios, which incorporate usually a little bit of artist statement as well. So that's a great sort of resource. But of course, there's many, many artist websites out there. I'll keep going with the questions while we wait for Maura to rejoin. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but let's see. Well, this is, I think, a good question. How do you judge, and a difficult one, so I'm going to do my best. How do you judge the artist statement, considering that each person is somewhere else in their process and has different skill sets and varying experiences? This is a really good question because no artist statement is the same. We talk about writing artist statements as though there's a formula, and there's some tools, there's some exercises, there's some techniques that can be useful, but there really is no formula. And if you are an artist and you find yourself, using a formula rather than navigating this question, and again, a more authentic way, you might not end up with the best artist statement. So I think that that's also true when it comes to, how we engage with artist statements in terms of, what we see on the other side, grant applications, curators. I think that it's not really so much about judging the statement, but about whether you get a sense from the artist statement that you understand something about their practice, that you have a lens in which to see their work in a deeper, more meaningful way. So for me, those end up being the most effective statements. And there's lots of different ways to do it. But there's no formula and there's no strict criteria for judgment. It's about finding the correct forms of representation for you and the ones that feel most authentic for you to fulfill this function, which is to articulate your practice to somebody else who's not you. Maura, I'm so glad you're back. I'm sorry we lost you. Do you have thoughts on the question of how curators navigate artist statements, as well as a second question, which is how do you judge the artist statement, considering that everywhere, everyone is somewhere different in their process and experience?
Yeah, I think, yeah, everyone's somewhere different. I mean, everyone is somewhere different in their process and experience, like that's just that's kind of life. And, sometimes, and like, as I guess I can speak to it as an artist, applying for things, there are so many variables, right? Like the artist statement, like these professional documents, like this is the stuff that we can exercise a little bit of like agency and control over as artists, right? Like, how do I want to present myself? But there are also like, 24 other variables that you have no control over, and sometimes I get rejected for things that I feel like I really should have got, like, why didn't I get that? Like, like I get all affronted. And then sometimes I get things and I'm like, wow, I really didn't deserve that. Like, I really that's like, how the hell did I get that? And, and I couldn't tell you, what the math of that is exactly, I think it's always like really, really variable. And that's kind of why, like, when I'm talking about these things, I try to put so much emphasis on like doing it kind of for yourself, like doing it as part of like a healthy artistic practice. Because for me, if I think too hard about like, why am I getting something and not another thing? Am I going to get this thing? Why did that person get that thing and I didn't? It's just like it's like a really toxic relationship to your own practice. Whereas if I can be like, well, I'm getting some like genuine pleasure, like I wrote this thing and I feel good about my work and how it represents me, then it's not, then the experience is more just, I don't know, like I can actually get something out of the experience instead of just like the drudgery of endless self-administration.
I think that's really helpful. Ultimately the artist statement is for you. I'm going to try and again condense a couple questions into one. We have a couple different questions about career stage. Someone observed that, they noticed that the more experienced an artist gets, the shorter and shorter their artist statement gets. Someone asked if they have advice for mid-career artists. Someone asks if new artists should be writing artist statements. Can you speak to a little bit about the different ways an artist can navigate writing the artist statement at different career stages and what changes maybe between those stages?
I wish so much that I had like saved old artist statements. Like I wish I had that statement from when I was 18 and that teacher said that to me, because I bet there was some good stuff in there, like hidden somewhere in there. And I would be really curious. I don't feel like I have a great bird's eye view on the development of my own artist statements. So I will say that. I don't think as I've moved from like emerging to mid-career, it's always horrible to stop being able to call yourself emerging, like I just want to emerge forever, but I don't think I am allowed to be emerging anymore. But I don't really feel like there was a huge change in the process. It's just kind of like, I get like, it's more like, I can see sort of as my work shifts, the emphasis in the writing shifting more. For me, I don't think my statements have particularly gotten shorter, but it could be that if you're, I make video, so there's not like a big commercial market for video, right? But it could be that if you're like an artist who's like in a more sort of like commercial gallery world, that your statements become less important as your sales increase or you're getting revenue from that. I could imagine that. As a reason that statements might get shorter over time, or maybe just like your reputation precedes you, so you don't, you're not required to write as much. But I really like writing about my work. So I don't think that as a thing has gotten shorter for me, and I don't really imagine that it will.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think an artist statement is just a different kind of task at different career stages. And at least for me, I mean, it's a different task, like based on the different place I'm at in terms of, what I'm doing, what I'm making, what I'm thinking about. I think that what we're trying to highlight maybe, and especially because there's so much anxiety around artist statements, is how it can be a tool for you to relate to your own thoughts and relate to your own practice. And in that sense, it's a same tool that you might use very differently at any stage of your career. And, I think I'm glad we're all talking about it. Career stages can be really tricky. I too feel sad. I can no longer call myself an emerging artist, though sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It's very tricky. But this question of, how you're thinking about your own practice is constantly going to be changing and constantly going to be evolving. So especially if you're a new artist, you might think about how this is a way for you to do something that you're not doing in the medium that you normally use, right? Again, think about its functionality. If you're an established artist, if you're, someone who's written thousands of artist statements, I think it's good to keep a sense of curiosity about it, a curiosity in terms of what could its function be now? What could its function be for you? How can you think differently about your career? And if you're a mid-career artist, I think actually that same sense of reinvention can be really empowering. There's a lot of lag sometimes people feel as mid-career artists. You're kind of between these two places that, have a little bit more maybe excitement or attention around them. But I think it's actually a really useful tool to constantly be curious about yourself, right? Curious about how you're making your work, how you're thinking about your work. And I really like someone said in the chat, we are always emerging. I think it's definitely true with an artist statement, right? And it's a way, actually, the artist statement can be a place to confront your own emergence, right? And to enjoy it, right? Rather than just, having to do this sort of, task for the sake of somebody else. We're almost out of time. If I didn't get to your question, please do feel free to email us. But Maura, I'm gonna turn it to you. Are there any final thoughts that you wanna leave people with about artist statements? And again, one final recommendation too, please, if you haven't checked it out, check out the Creative Capital curriculum. There is a lot more about artist statements there. And we will also post this recording there as well as on our website.
Yeah, I mean, I also, just to reiterate that, I think, a lot of like the question about the difference between the bio and the artist statement, like a lot of it might be helpful to look at the curriculum and see some of those things kind of written out and discussed on the page, so that they become more concrete. And I see a lot of people like wanting to look at artist statements. I think reading other people's artist statements is like one of the best things that you can do to just demystify this process. But I don't really have any last thoughts. I'm so delighted. Everyone has been so lovely and the questions have been amazing. And yeah, I'm so happy to have been able to do this.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Maura, for sharing all of your insight about artist statements. Thank you so much to our interpreters, our captioner, my colleagues at Creative Capital, and thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next Artist Lab. Take care, everyone. And thank you so much for being with us.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.